Good afternoon. Welcome. I welcome everyone to our daily briefing. We are at the Foreign Ministry Press Center. Let's start with the schedule of Sergey Lavrov. On June 17th, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov will hold talks with Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Madagascar, Alice Diaz. They will discuss traditionally friendly relations, outline practical steps to further strengthen their political dialogue and contacts in different areas to step up a mutually beneficial cooperation in trade, economic, humanitarian, and other areas. An exchange of views will also take place on regional and global agenda of mutual interest in accordance cooperation with the UN and other international platforms. On June 22nd, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov will hold in Moscow a meeting with former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Chair of the UN General Assembly, number 73, María Espinosa. I'll remind that she represents Ecuador in the context of her nomination for the post of the UN Secretary General. The minister will outline in detail the main criteria that a candidate should comply with. The key requirements are non-selective approach to principles of UN, equidistance in policy, building bridges between member states, and countering the so-called privatization of the UN by the collective West. We expect that María Fernanda Espinosa will share her views on how the UN should function currently and will tell about her vision on the prospects of the future of the UN. The focus will be on her approaches towards the post of UN General Secretary in terms of the international agenda and in particular Ukraine. On June 23rd, the Diplomatic Academy of GMO Foreign Ministry organizes the roundtable. Over 100 ambassadors have been invited, representatives of international organizations. It will feature Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov. He will cite facts that demonstrate the true role of Western countries in emergence and development of Ukrainian crisis and its true goals. We hope that to have a traditional trust-based exchange of views on Ukraine and other relevant issues of international agenda within this event. On June 24th, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov will participate in the annual scientific and expert forum called Primakov Readings. The topic of the 12th meeting is Rule-Free World, Game of Power, and a question mark should be present here. Everyone sees that a group of countries that have imagined themselves to be the arbiters of the fate of all mankind are, with zeal and persistence worthy of a better cause, tearing down the system of written and unwritten international norms and rules built over past decades. What the actions of the West lead to and what the agenda can be of the global majority, all these questions will be dealt with by the participants of the forum. Please follow our social networks and the website where we will broadcast the statement of the minister. You'll also find the text version of this statement. Let us move on to Ukraine. The Kiev neo-Nazi regime, supported by its handlers, continues its terror against the civilian, peaceful population and infrastructure of our country. 254 people have been injured, over 50 died, including one child. 225 were wounded, including 12 teenagers and children. I'd like just to cite some facts so that everyone abroad, policymakers, I'm talking about when they make decisions about what side to take and whether to continue to support Ukraine, learn where this money goes. In Belgorod region, June 10th to 17th, the AFU attacked a passenger bus, killing 3 and injuring over 50, including a 9-month-old girl and 2 children, 5 and 13 years old, respectively. The Bryansk region, June 10th to 17th, enemy UAVs killed 9, injuring 22, including a 5-year-old boy, a 16-year-old boy, and a rescue team consisting of 3 people. June 17th, Ukrainian terrorists attacked a bus carrying Gomel children's football team. They were traveling from Belarus to Russia. They were traveling to a holiday destination. The wife of the coach of this children team was pregnant. She'll never come back home. She has 2 daughters. 6 children were wounded. Yesterday, the Foreign Ministry of Russia published a commentary giving our assessments with regard to this tragedy. The DPR, June 10th to 17th, 1 person died, 24 were injured, including a girl born in 2017. The Zaporozhye region, June 10th to 17th, the AFU strikes killed 22 people, including a teenager. Banderites have 4 times attacked the medical unit in Energodar. Damaging mobile obstetric unit. On June 13th, they attacked the transport workshop of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, damaging the fuel pumps and the building's glazing. 2 vehicles were completely damaged. The Krasnodar region, the debris of UAVs killed 1 and injured 3. The Kursk region, June 10th to 17th, the Banderite attacks injured 14 people, including a 16-year-old girl. The Lugansk People's Republic, June 10th to 17th, drone attacks killed 2 people, including a 17-year-old boy, injured 15 people, including a 3-year-old girl with her mother and a 16-year-old boy. The Moscow region, the enemy attacks on June 17th killed 16 people, including a 13-year-old girl. What happened today, overnight, was published by the leadership of the Moscow region, the Orlov region, June 14th. An unmanned aerial vehicle packed with fragmentation elements killed 1 person, injuring 9. The Republic of Crimea, overnight into June 14th, a residential district was attacked. An aged woman died. 3 another person died. In the Tula region, June 15th, the enemy UAVs killed 3 and injured another 3, including a 1-year-old child. The Kherson region, June 10th to 17th, UAV strikes killed 3, injured 28. Everyone should be sentenced for these crimes. Russian investigative authorities continue to gather proof to bringing regime officials, militants, commanders, and foreign mercenaries to criminal responsibility for the crimes committed, to 14 years in prison. Were sentenced mercenaries from France, Georgia, Colombia, and to 15 years a Croatian participant of neo-Nazi formations, Lukas Stimic, Oliver James Wolford, Nuri Mitagvardia, Anthony Mikhail Sanapo, William Emil Chavez, Miguel Jehison, and others. And it's just remarkable how the situation in the information space is changing, and how fakes are being propagated. On the eve of the summit in the group of 7 in French Evian-les-Bains that took place in June, and the opening the first cluster of negotiations on the accession of Ukraine and Moldova to the US, and an upcoming meeting of the so-called coalition of the willing. The regime of Zelensky attempted to fabricate another staging situation to convince its allies to step up the military support of Kiev. Kiev is propagating rumors that allegedly overnight into June 15th, the armed forces of Russia applied, as they said, on Bankovaya, the Gyumri UAVs to strike on the Assumption Church of the Great Patriotic Monastery, setting the building to the fire. They presented the debris of the shot down UAVs of Russia that they allegedly had found there, but it was not convincing. The public was presented with the prepared debris of UAVs with a rusted engine. No one could brush the fake. Witnesses published a video footage showing what happened really there. It says or shows that the church was damaged because the Ukrainian regime tried to shut down the Russian missile with Patriot MLRS, and it was expired. The missile on June 15th, Russian Defense Ministry said that the Russian armed forces do not plan and do not attack civilian infrastructure facilities. They're trying to reach the necessary effect. Zelensky rushed to the Kiev Patriotic Monastery. Didn't go there to participate in religious processes. At the background of the damaged monastery, he accused Russia of this strike, so he wanted to please the Western audiences. He called upon providing Ukraine with new military means, but he said nothing about persecutions of the church, the backdrop of which he was standing. He said nothing about persecution of the monastic brethren and criminal persecution of the vicar of the monastery, Metropolitan Pavel of Uzhgorod and Chernobyl, of the canonical Orthodox Church, as well as the actual seizure of the monastery by schismatics from the so-called Orthodox Church of Ukraine, who organized cooking shows, dance competitions, and other entertainment events inside churches. And he also kept silence about the looting. The looting of the Lavra itself by the regime and the removal of the saints' relics kept there with the intent of later selling these treasures of world orthodoxy in the West, gloating over this things. It's an attempt by Bandera supporters holed up in the monastery to cover up traces of theft of church property. The relics we're talking about, and somehow cover up what they were doing there. And it is also remarkable that the so-called strike was used by the Zelensky regime to put pressure on the canonical church, because on June 15th, the Ukrainian State Service for Ethnopolitics and Freedom of Conscience, notorious for its fabrications, issued a call for the hierarchy, clergy, monks, and laity of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church to withdraw from the Moscow Patriarchate, and then they justify why they should do that. It's a unique story, I would say. Just imagine it's a state body that calls upon representatives of a certain religion, saying that they should do this and that, which church they should join and which gods they should pray to. Let's see what happened there in detail on June 9th. In Thailand, there was another gathering of the so-called Northern Baltic 8. It's a Denmark. It was the 8 countries of the region, and the main part of the agenda were Ukrainian drones in European airspace. Who was the guest of honor? It was Zelensky. According to the media, he was spreading the idea, the media were quoting him, he was propagating the package deals in terms of UAVs. He wanted to propose manufacturing them together and test them on the battlefield to train the personnel, taking into account the experience of the AFU, and sending Ukrainian experts in order to protect the territories from the UAVs that had changed course. Zelensky said to the European regime that he was ready to strike Russia's inland, if you formulate it directly. So who responded to that? Latvia, that heads together with Britain the so-called drone coalition, as well as Norway, the leader of the maritime coalition in support of Ukraine. It was declared that by Riga that the forum is an agreement with the Kiev regime would be signed. Prime Minister and Defense Minister of Norway that came to Tallinn, they promised to Ukraine that they would supply Ukraine with 200 unmanned boats equipped with sensor armaments, UAVs, to the tune of $127 million. It was noted that their joint development with the Kiev regime, the goal of it is to defend the Black Sea corridor that allegedly has a defining importance for the international food security. One should remember the recent explosion of the Ukrainian unmanned boat in the Romanian Constanța. It's not the single case that we saw, or another explosion close to the city of Samsun in Turkey, or maybe the Grecian island Lefkada, and the Ukrainian regime apologized for that. The Ukrainians said openly that they were preparing and launching attacks on the Russian fleet, energy and port infrastructure in the Black Sea, and their intent to contribute to the escalation in the region and undermine the international maritime navigation. He was under impression after the trip to Estonia. It's the homeland of Kaja Kallas, if you don't know. Zelensky on June 10th issued a decree that, according to which the day of unmanned system would be established that would be celebrated on June 11th each day. Not only on this track we see craziness, of course we should also mention the history, and of course it is closely intertwined with everything that is happening in that country. According to Ukrainian media, on June 9th, some representatives of the expert community agreed upon the draft project that would allow to erect a monument to Mazepa. Remember, he received an order of Judas from Peter the Great. They were saying that they want to return this figure to the Ukrainian public space and to fill it with Ukrainian historical figures. I'd like to apologize. We're talking about the Kiev Pechorsk monastery. We're talking about the church that these experts, we're talking about military special services experts, they wanted to fill this monastery with different entertainment shows. They hold these shows in the altar, and they would like to unveil monuments within the Lavra. The Kiev regime wants their embodiments within the Lavra. It will be a sculptural composition made in the granite column 2.5 meters high with a bust of Mazepa on the top, made of bronze. It will become the central element of the new tourism route, the route of Mazepa. Just think about it. it is all happening within this church. Have you seen something of this sort? Maybe not. The aforementioned experts called upon the Kiev city authorities to go back to the decree of Yushchenko of 2007 that said that they had to commemorate Getman, Mazepa, and to erect a full-fledged monument devoted to this person in Kiev. Just erect a church devoted to Mazepa, or maybe the pillar where you could canonize him.
And in order to leave him in this historical memory, maybe this has already been done. Maybe we're just not aware of it. Just worship him. In December 2025, the bust of Mazepa was already on display in one of the Lavros museum buildings. Commenting on this, we noted that the very act of erecting this monument to the traitor, this traitor, excommunicated, by the way, by the Russian Orthodox Church, it's cynical, it's blasphemous, and demonstrates the level of obscurantism to which the Kiev regime has sunk. So those assessments remain relevant. So what is most hated by the Kiev regime? It's the Russian language. They did not forget about that. On the 12th of June, the Kiev regime signed a law adopted by the Verkhovna Rada, according to which the Russian language is removed from the languages protected by the European Charter of for regional minorities languages. So they have ignored the relevant commitments like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the relevant OSCE commitments. It's also contrary to the Constitution of Ukraine itself. I would remind those who have forgotten about it. Article 10 of the Ukrainian Constitution mentions the guarantees of protection of the Russian language. However, European complicity and ignorance of discrimination against ethnic Russians have taught the Kiev regime to be unpunished and have taught them to disregard their international obligations. Of course, they have done an entire performance of that by coinciding that with Russia Day. There was a so-called event dedicated to the creation of a Ukrainian language, so-called cultural product. And Zelensky, a hardened Russophobe and champion of the state language, his direct quote, "To displace Russians in various areas from the battlefield to all other spheres," Zelensky said, "that's culture, content in theaters, cinema, music, and exhibitions." Why has he not added his head there? Because he thinks in Russian and he speaks Russian as well. It's similar to Orwell, this piece of news about the beginning of this first cluster of negotiations on Ukraine and Moldova's accessions to the EU. I would speak about it in detail. So all the above facts confirm the urgency of the tasks of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats coming from its territory. These goals will necessarily be achieved, as mentioned many times by the Russian government. Now the information about the report, we have mentioned that back yesterday, crimes of the Kiev regime, murdering and robbing of the Russian population. Yesterday there was a presentation in the Russia Today Center of this report prepared by the International Tribunal on Crimes of Ukrainian Nazis, chaired by Maxim Grigoriev. I would remind you that the International Public Tribunal on the Ukrainian neo-Nazis crimes was established in 2022. during the International Conference on the Crimes of Ukrainian Armed Forces in Donbass from 2014 to 2022. And it includes representatives of civil society from 35 countries who collect evidence of the Kiev regime's crimes, submitted to national law enforcement agencies, and present information on Russia and international platforms. The report covers crimes of the Ukrainian armed forces in the city of Dimitrov. All the facts have been verified, documented, and this butcher staging that has tired literally everyone. The victims of the mentioned crimes mentioned in the reports have relatives, photographs, so everything that distinguishes the real story of tragedy from fakes. And I would highly recommend to anyone interested in the real situation in Ukraine to study this report. The link will be published in the text version of the Today briefing. Yesterday, during my welcoming speech to the participants in that event, I quoted some passages. It's not for weak people, it's for those who have strong nerves. And maybe some people think they are strong and they have seen a lot, but you have not seen that. Just read this report. Read it carefully. And realize you are not reading it about the long gone past, not the 10th centuries or some centuries BC. You are reading that just now. About what is happening in the 21st century, somewhere nearby. And it's being so generously paid by the West to the Kiev regime. And I cannot miss I have mentioned the topic of the opening of the first clusters of the EU talks with Ukraine and Moldova. This started on the 15th of June in Luxembourg. Some words about this issue. It's part of bilateral interagency conference, and Zelensky has said a few words about those talks. His, so to say, victorious statements. It's obvious that this cluster, it opens first and closes the last. It's about the functioning of rights and freedoms and democratic institutions, public administration reform, public procurement, and financial control. It's unattainable for the Kiev regime. I think everyone understands that. According to domestic law, including the Constitution of Ukraine, human rights violations have reached just unprecedented level in Ukraine, particularly with regard to ethnic Russian and Russian-speaking citizens. Freedom of speech, assembly, canonical orthodoxy are under attack. The state apparatus is literally riddled with corruption. Those who have been just absolute lawyers of Bankova and radical nationalism is flourishing, and the Sandu regime has effectively abandoned the principles of law and media freedom. Totalitarian practices have long prevailed. They just resort to repression against political opponents, regional leaders, and public figures. They stifle information resources, broadcasting alternative viewpoints. Russian language is being attacked, And the state apparatus of Moldova is deeply corrupt. So this first cluster about Ukraine's and Moldova's accession to the EU is in a purely political dimension. It's needed for advertisement just to demonstrate alleged successes of those countries in some Euro integration. This characterizes the EU itself, its enlargement policy, where it's not the Copenhagen criteria that prevail, but some geostrategic considerations. And what has remained of this mask of human rights that the Brussels representatives have used to cover themselves? Where are human rights here? Money just spent for measures against civil population. So Western Europe will just promote Moldova and Ukraine, bring them to the acceptable levels. And now they are being joined by those, I primarily mean the Kiev regime now, who are beggars in the world. They have taken loans for their peoples for many decades to come. So what will follow? It will be the economical collapse. And it will be in favor of geopolitical and, I think, militarist aspirations. Due to cutting spending for common Europeans and just wasting billions of euros for the militarization of the continent. And some money will be found for those fraudulent activities. This is confirmed by the European structures like Europol, who testify that there is a threat emanating from the Ukrainian territory, and it's a real problem. It's arms and drug smuggling, human trafficking, cyber fraud. And the deadlines for Moldova and Ukraine once again underline those double standards of the EU for candidates from other regions, but actually it's direct fraud. It's just deceiving those they have lured for years and decades, demanding from them a lot and not giving anything back. For example, the Western Balkans, they have been complying with the demands for decades and meeting the new demands. What have they received? Just nothing. So we will monitor the negotiations between Brussels and the neo-Nazi totalitarian Chisinau and observe how this process will influence the EU itself. Which is disregarding its own principles and values and its economic situation. Now we will provide a detailed commentary because we have repeatedly commented on the issue of biological activities of the EU beyond its national territory, of the US beyond its national territory, and it's not a new material for us. As the US side has tried to avoid discussing this issue on many occasions in order to conceal the financing by the US government of more than 120 biolaboratories in more than 30 countries, including more than 40 biolaboratories in Ukraine. As repeatedly stated by our Ministry of Defense, Russian Ministry of Defense colleagues, The information on the Pentagon activities and its partners in Ukraine has been obtained during the special military operation in Ukraine. And there was also a report by connected with the creation of biological laboratories in Ukraine. We will post links in the text version of the today briefing. The Parliamentary Commission has started the whole list of the available documents about the creation of biolaboratories obtained during the special military operation, and the data on those biolaboratories. And this issue has just been received some fresh revelations with regard to what Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence of the US, has revealed. Just have a look. More than 1/3 of the US laboratories abroad is situated in one country. So which country? The country where an illegal coup d'etat has been committed. It's Ukraine. And other former Soviet Union states surrounding the perimeter of Russia. So that's according to that American report. There were pathogens of Siberian anthrax, tularemia, tuberculosis, African swine fever, Newcastle disease, Middle East respiratory syndrome, Marburg, Ebola, and Lassa viruses, and the plague. The scale and the aims of those activities are just obvious. What has been stored in Odessa, uncontrolled by the Ukrainian authorities, more than 400 units of cholera, bacteria, and a lot of bacteria of Siberian ulcer. And in Ukraine, there is a forced growth of a number of cases of other diseases. They could have occupied themselves with the studies of what causes other diseases such as chickenpox and tuberculosis. But it's actually obvious that they have studied what had no direct relation towards the region. There were pathogens of very dangerous diseases there that compose biological weapons. Among the institution is the Kherson Laboratory, Mechnikov Anti-Plague Institute in Odessa, Transcarpathian Diagnostics Laboratory, and those 4 sites. For them, Washington has provided more than $9 million, $250,000. So the key subcontractor was the Mechnikov Institute. It was also the highly pathogenic bird flu and the infections having a high pandemical potential and able to bring detriment to the agricultural area, like the swine plague and the Newcastle disease. So they have started the propagation of those pathogenic diseases via migratory birds, and also possibilities to transmit diseases to humans like plague and other serious diseases by those animals. And it was the scope was not only the Ukrainian regions bordering Russia, but also the territory of Russia itself. So we hope that the US authorities will provide the details about, make public the details about those facts, and specific steps will follow. Conclusions will be made about the inadmissibility of a situation where one state funds such actions on the territory of another state. It's bringing risks to civil population, and it influences the bordering countries. It's actually some form of neo-colonialism practiced by the United States of America and its satellites now.
That's why we call upon our international partners over the world to ensure national security in terms of control over bio-research conducted on their territory, on the results initiated by the current administration of the US. I'm talking about the investigation of bioactivity of the US abroad, will be judged by their actions, and we will continue our work at relevant platforms. In particular within BTWC, so that we can remove concerns about the bioactivity of the US close to the Russian border. When I'm saying your countries, I mean that it does only concern Russia, because it's part of this conflict reality that we witness today. Other adjacent countries, adjacent to Ukraine or Russia, allegedly don't have anything to do with it. How come? We saw how COVID-19 was spreading in 2020. Moreover, there's another thing. That pandemic led to problems with memory in many people, but not in everyone. Many still remember when COVID-19 was spreading. There was nothing that could help, neither visas nor passports or residence permits, nor weapons. Nothing could save people from that horrible tragedy that spread across the globe. We see biolaboratories open in different regions of the world. The US are opening them together with their defense ministry, or the war ministry as they called it recently. These biolaboratories are not under any supervision by the authorities of the countries that open them. I'd like to remind that this is a common issue, and we should solve it in advance. Now, we have received many questions regarding the developments in the Great Britain. Many things do not concern us correctly, but many British newspapers constantly couple these events with Russia. Recent events have demonstrated that the systemic crisis is being deepened when it comes to the government and its activities in the country. The resignation of Mr. Healy became the source of growing problems within the cabinet of Mr. Starmer. This defense sector is now engaged in the situation in Ukraine. That's why it has become especially painful. Moreover, this agency was used by laborists to advertise themselves. It is a heavy blow to the British government. British politicians prefer to jump ship, and their followers continue to deal with the problems. It was done in the same way by previous cabinets. It is cause of concern because domestic problems of the Great Britain are being projected to the international affairs in our country. The worse the situation is, the more active the mythical threat of Russia is being played. You see the telling illustration of this in the capture of vessels in international waters under the disguise of combating the so-called shadow fleet. Especially cynical were the statements of Keir Starmer and his ministers on the mythical threat of attack against Europe and the Great Britain. In the morning, I participated in the events of the Federation Council of the Federal Assembly. Those events were devoted to the Day of Sorrow and Remembrance, June 22nd. It reminded me of the period when the Third Reich, in their doctrinal documents and the propaganda of Goebbels, was stating that the Soviet Union wanted to attack Europe and one should defend oneself. But we saw who was the one to attack. The Nazi Germany attacked, invaded the Soviet Union, as well as the countries that it didn't want to attack initially. It attacked and invaded its neighbors, friends and allies. Then it invaded the Soviet states. Later on, the Nuremberg trials demonstrated that it was not an agreement that was struck with the allies. It was a plan all along that according to which the Nazi Germany wanted to capture the lands of the people that they considered to be of the second sort, and everything was coordinated in accordance with the programs of the Third Reich, and it's very similar to what is happening now in the Great Britain. They constantly say that Russia wants to invade England. Can I ask you a question? When was the last time that Russia attacked England? Can they present any proof? They tend to say that Russia can launch an attack because it has relevant capacities and because it used to do that in the past. But my question is, can you give me any examples of Russia attacking England? History doesn't know these facts. The situation is reverse. Over the centuries, Russia has never captured any or tried to capture the English territory. It was the reverse, vice versa. England bombarded the Solovetsky Monastery and Petropavlovsk in the 19th century. It also created a concentration camp near the city of Arkhangelsk at the beginning of the 20th century. Today, London continues this course, dispatching reconnaissance aircraft to our territory and trains the Ukrainian armed forces and participates directly in the terrorist attacks in our country. I'd like to give a piece of advice to British elites and leadership. The only way to exit this vicious circle is to stop squandering the money of British taxpayers, stop the sanctions pressure that undermines the global trade and their business reputation, stop pursuing the shadow fleet vessels and looking for spies that they have made up themselves. Well, you've caught Ukrainian citizens that set Keir Starmer's house to fire. These were Ukrainian citizens. Check if they are somehow connected to the Zelensky regime. You don't need to look for Russia's tracks here, Russia's engagement. They said that those incidents with setting the house on fire, and the British newspapers were publishing such news, were conducted with the participation of Russian diplomats, students that use IT technology. Even you don't have to do that. Instead, you should focus on your real issues in the social sector, on the migration problem, on healthcare and the situation in this domain. They have to enhance it. They have to work on it. This would benefit the United Kingdom and the international stability. By the way, more on the Great Britain, we see more evidence. We see more evidence on extrajudicial executions by Western coalition forces, particularly British special forces, of the Afghan civilian population during Operation Enduring Freedom, which are coming to light with increasing frequency. What are we talking about? From 2010 to 2013, when servicemen of the elite British Special Air Service killed under suspicious circumstances at least 50 Afghan citizens, including aged people and minors. Earlier, the Russian Foreign Ministry gave the public assessment to these events. It said that it was the war crimes of British servicemen in Afghanistan. Recently, the public was shown the witness accounts. They say that extrajudicial killings took place. The victims, the number of victims is up to 80 people. We believe that people that perpetrated it should be brought to justice. We should stop the impunity that allows Western servicemen ignore the lives of civilians. Britain perceives the citizens to the east of the Suez Canal to be people of the third sort. Over and over again, we see the hypocrisy and double standards hidden behind a facade of respectability. This is very characteristic of the policies of London. They do it under the guise of human rights course. Britain is complicit in the terrorist activity of the Kiev regime. It is sponsoring the Kiev regime and is encouraging the regime in all ways possible. London is not a paragon of human rights respect. They trample the norms of international law and do it openly. A horrible story happened in Gyumri, desecration of memorial devoted to the heroes of the Great Patriotic War. It's called Mother Armenia Monument. On June 10th, we heard first reports that this memorial was desecrated. Of course, it provokes deep outrage. This sacrilegious act is not just hooliganism, but it's a coordinated attack against the historic memory. It's an attempt to desecrate the memory. Of course, we set a note of protest. The servicemen of the military base in Gyumri engaged in reconstructing the memorial. Our embassy in Yerevan gave its assessment to this event. The Armenians said that they captured the perpetrator. We hope that justice will prevail, and these crimes that provoked outrage in both countries will be brought to justice. But at the same time, the official Armenian authorities did not condemn directly the desecration of the monument. They did not say explicitly what they thought about it. They kept silence instead. It has become a bad tradition. Remember, in Yerevan, no one reacted to the statement of Zelensky, who threatened to disrupt the victory parade in Moscow. On the Red Square where great figures that saved the world from brown plague are buried. And they are connected directly with the history of Armenia and the Armenian people. Of course, we understand that this connivance in an unbridled anti-Russian campaign that accompanied the parliamentary elections in Armenia created fertile ground for such barbaric acts. We've seen attempts of some information resources linked to the authorities of Armenia to demonstrate, to present this incident as an act of provocation by Russia. You won't believe it. One could believe it, but we are trying to maintain and protect all the monuments devoted to the soldiers of the Red Army. And we see that in Western Europe, these monuments are being demolished. We're the only country who is protecting these monuments. No one is helping us, so please do not make up these stories. We are not provoking anyone to do anything. This is blatant lies, flagrant lies, fabricated, and it is beyond common sense, let alone courtesy. Trample the foot, the memory of predecessors and combating memorials is an integral part, or maybe a prerequisite, to get closer to the European Union, on the territory of which the monuments and memorials are being demolished, and even the tombs to the soldiers that fought against Nazism and fascism. We hope that our common history and its glorious pages would not be part of the reform according with European standards now on our reciprocal measures that we took with regard to the European Union measures. We're talking about notification procedure for crossing the state border of the Russian Federation for employees of diplomatic missions of EU member states, Schengen agreement countries that are not part of the EU, and representative offices of the EU in Moscow. On the website of the Department of State Protocol of the Russian Foreign Ministry, in announcements and events page, you'll find the information. It's a Q&A material on how the notification procedure works. The notification procedure on how to cross the state border for the aforementioned people entered into force as a reciprocal measure to the measures of the European Union that was joined by certain European countries that are not part of the European Union that made it more harder for our diplomats and officials to cross the borders within the European Union and the Schengen zone. Starting from January 2026, when our diplomats want to cross the border of the country they're staying in, should in advance notify the countries and other countries of the European Union, the Schengen zone, that they are entering or transiting. A number of countries of the European Union introduced a permissive procedure. They, apart from damage, they are discriminatory. Not in compliance with the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations of 1961 and the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations of 1963, and of course, these measures are tantamount to the failure of the said countries to properly fulfill their obligations as host states under Article 25 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations and Article 28 of the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, to provide all facilities for the performance of the functions of a diplomatic mission or consular post. Once again, I'd like to underline that the notification procedure that we have introduced is of reciprocal nature. The Russian side adheres strictly to the importance of maintaining the diplomatic channels of communication, including with the countries that are pursuing a hostile or non-friendly policies with regard to our country to Russia. We are convinced that in any situation, one should always give a chance to diplomacy, to diplomats. However, no one should forget that the basic principle of diplomatic relations is reciprocity.
And we have mentioned that on many occasions, and regularly we have mentioned reciprocative measures. Discrimination against our diplomatic missions employees. If they are lifted, we will be ready to reconsider the notification procedure. We have published a warning to the Russian Federation citizens who intend to go to Thailand. This material is available on the website of the Russian Foreign Ministry, and we have also observed, after our commentary, there were commentaries by the Thai Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But unfortunately, in those statements by the Thai side, we have not seen such an, frank talk about the root causes that have forced us to issue that warning. And taking into account Bangkok has published the relevant materials, we have to continue this issue. The Russian Foreign Ministry warns the Russian citizens to be careful when traveling to Thailand due to high risks of detention or arrest in that country at the request of the U.S. law enforcement and intelligence agencies. Unfortunately, this friendly country, popular with Russian tourists, it remains one of the places where Washington has launched a veritable hunt for Russians. I think that everyone knows the story of Victor Bout. Unfortunately, he's not the only one, as it was back in 2008 when this vicious practice had started. And Victor Bout spent more than 10 years in the U.S. prison. Our diplomats fought for him, our foreign ministry, our public fought for him. But the U.S., it acted coercively It takes a lot of measures to catch our citizens. It's intimidation, psychological pressure, coercing them immediately into confessing. This vicious practice is gaining momentum since the start of the special military operation, and those illegal sanctions targeting these certain segments of Russian economy. I would remind you that those sanctions are illegal, illegitimate. And Russian citizens risk being targeted by the US special services. So those who have reasons to believe that they can be prosecuted by the US authorities, we advise them to refrain from traveling to Thailand. I would underline that it's connected with the bilateral extradition treaty, and they need to avoid transfers at airports as well. So when traveling abroad, it is essential to have contact information of the Russian Foreign Ministry. Our missions abroad and our diplomatic and consular offices will continue as far as they can, as they are in the countries of their stay, in the context of the domestic legislation of those countries. They will still continue to assist our compatriots in distress. One more issue. I would like to remind you that since 2015, according to the UN General Assembly resolution, the 19th of June is marked as the day of combating sexual violence in military conflicts. It's for grave effects of military conflicts. Our country condemns all forms of sexual violence in military actions, hostility zones. Such actions can have no justifications. They are a flagrant violation of the international humanitarian law, bring a lot of harm to the victims and their families, and they put obstacles to post-conflict restorations. We condemn the perpetrators, and we will facilitate aid to the victims based on the international law and primarily the UN Charter. In recent years, this sensitive issue has become a reason for politicization and putting pressure against countries or groups of countries. And sometimes it's just a way of manipulation with public opinion. But the real problem in this sphere is on many occasions just ignored. There is a practice of accusations without proof, and we stand for investigation into all cases of sexual violence in military conflicts. And we think that it is important to clearly verify the data on the basis of which it will be possible to make assessments also by the international structures. And we also think that it is necessary to study the root causes of conflicts, as it is necessary in order to counter this phenomenon. And on this day, I would like to express our solidarity with all the victims of sexual violence and military conflicts. And we aim to fight against these shameful actions. And there were many questions actually, and we have replies on whether the event held last year for the first time and so popular not only in our country but abroad, namely the Diamond Butterfly Film Award, At Nikita Mikhalkov's studio, there was the first award ceremony. It's a key event for the Russian Academy of Cinematographic Arts. 34 films from 17 countries competed for this award, and that was very important for intercultural dialogue. Taking into account the scale of that event, it was so, this format, it was so in demand, so needed. The project, by the way, was implemented with the active support, multi-scale support of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and our missions abroad also assisted that format in many ways. The initiative and inspiration behind the creation of the Film Academy and the award, the hero of labor of the Russian Federation, People's Artist of Russia, Nikita Sergeyevich Mikhalkov. You can have a look at the activities of Nikita Mikhalkov himself and our representatives, our public figures. They have made a lot of comments about this format. It was also done during the business breakfast at the East Economic Forum. You can find all those statements. It's about the preservation of the cultural identity and the common spiritual values for humankind, and we have provided detailed comments on Zvezda holding radio, and we will post a link in the text version of the today briefing as well. So in this context, the Russian Film Academy contributes to historical memory preservation of peoples, and the viewers, they are provided with a set of films created by filmmakers from Russia, China, Serbia, South Africa, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Indonesia, and many other countries. So we were asked, what will happen this year? Will there be a continuation? Or will it be not one day, for one day, like a butterfly? No, this butterfly is a diamond butterfly, so it's a long-standing value. So this year, the gala ceremony, of the Open Eurasian Film Award Diamond Butterfly will once again be held in Moscow. So the intriguing part is when this will happen. It will be unveiled very soon, but the film screenings have already started. They are underway, and they will be held in our country, of course, and in 8 countries: Serbia, South Africa, China, North Korea, Abkhazia, Hungary, Italy, and France. And the first country of the international route, Serbia has already become the first country. The international film screening program has started in Belgrade on the 12th of June. The discussion was entitled Cinema Unites, From Shared Values to Joint Creativity, and participants discussed the possibilities of cultural dialogue and prospects for joint film production, promotion of national cinema, and development of professional communication, and the creative growth among filmmakers from different countries. I will try to find a link and incorporate it into the text version of the today briefing. We are glad that filmmakers from all over the world have their own independent film platform. There is a chance to talk about what is most important. and be recognized worldwide. Filmmakers can take part from all over the world, and it's about true values and common values. For the Russian audience, the award has become a window into the multifaceted world of national cultures and fostering a comprehensive understanding of contemporary art and belonging to a shared cultural space. Its interaction with international audience without politicization and this hell of a narrow-mindedness, so as it is pronounced on the international platform. They have changed gender. They have provided the relevant symbols, but instead of films, I will not say what they will show instead of films. It's about cinema, actually. But within cinema, through art, many topics are discussed, important for the humanity, but not as the narratives as the Westerners say, but what a human being faces, which challenges, which difficulties, which inner obstacles a human is fighting, inner contradictions. So I would say that cinema is not a banality, but it's a channel for communication that will give people an opportunity to better understand each other, to see the world in someone else's eyes, but through the eyes of another human being, to feel that they are part of that, part of the culture, and to understand the multifaceted nature of other peoples. So it's not just a prize, but a possibility to influence the situation in the world and to discuss the issues that are important for the entire humanity. So we will cooperate and our foreign missions in the countries where the screenings will be conducted. They will convey the relevant information to you. Please keep an eye on the accounts, and we will also inform you about that. So in order to conclude the introductory part, the issue that is of importance, that is relevant now, the 22nd of June, it's 85 years since the most tragical dates of our history and the history of the entire humankind, the start of the Great Patriotic War, which lasted 1,418 days and nights, that claimed the lives of 27 million Soviet citizens and left its mark on every Soviet family. On this day, bowing our heads in memory of the fallen, we clearly recognize that the cause that led to this fatality was aggressive, misanthropic nature of German Nazism, Italian fascism, Japanese militarism, this policy of the Axis powers. They are now talking about the axis of evil, so that was it. Their plans to seize Soviet territory, it was due to the connivance of leading European powers. It was peaceful measures, again, for in relation to the aggressor. So those attempts, they remained unanswered. Western democracies pursued a policy of appeasement. I would say that once again, and in order to direct aggression eastward, it was the Munich Agreement of 1938, when Czechoslovakia was literally fed to Berlin. They gave its industrial potential And Churchill also participated, and Poland participated. Churchill called it the hyena of Europe, and Hungary took part in that, which led to global catastrophe. During the battles of Khalkhin-Gol, the Far East and Munich was concluded the British-Japanese Reciprocity Agreement, granting Tokyo a free hand in China. So those hands were freed, and then they were in blood up to the elbow. So in order to resolve their own security problems at the expense of the security and sovereignty of other peoples and states is impossible. This lesson, it has not been studied by the European politicians. They have not cured this illness. So those industrial groups, governments and citizens supporting the Hitler's war crimes, and that Drang nach Osten, the strike to the east, virtually participants of every European country participated in that. So war entered every house, affected every family, leaving wounds among those who have lost what has been the most valuable. Daughters, sons, mothers and fathers, peaceful life, it has been lost. And belief in humankind, it has nearly been lost. And then our Red Army, our Soviet soldiers, brought back this faith. Konstantin Simonov wrote a poem about this tragedy, conveying this pain of international pain that is not cured by time. That day was just a disaster for us for the 4 years. It was such a race and has caused so many victims that for 20 or 30 years it was just difficult for those alive to believe they are alive. And the dead, they were just visited by their relatives, and the time adds someone else into the lists and erects monuments. He just could not imagine, Konstantin Simonov could not imagine that in 20 and 30 years those monuments, they will be destroyed, and with the descendants of our heroes.
The heroes of the world of peace, and our heroes will protect these monuments from desecration, from destruction, from looting. We will protect the historic memory of the whole world. War of destruction was declared to our country, and our people accepted this challenge. We fought to death with the fury, with the noble fury, and it was the righteous cause, and the enemy was destroyed, and the victory was ours. There's no statute of limitation for these crimes. Russia has recognized these crimes as genocide of the Russian people, and will continue to convince the European Western countries to accept the same, because they're responsible for unleashing the most bloody, the bloodiest war in the history. They cynically rewrite history, encourage the spread of neo-Nazism, rampant revanchism, and outright Russophobia. They issue anti-Russian Russophobic statements. They rewrite history, and they put responsibility for unleashing the war on Germany and the Soviet Union, an equal responsibility. They want to belittle the feat of the Russian Red Army. they are offensive for our country, for the whole world. They desecrate the memory of the whole civilization, and they run counter to the verdict of the Nuremberg trials, undermine the foundations of the post-war world enshrined in the UN Charter, and just drag the humankind back to the barbaric times. Today, we express sorrow for those who gave their lives to perform their sacred duty to defend their fathership, and we would not allow to erase the feat of the Soviet Union that saved the whole world from the brown plague and its horrors. Vladimir Putin said during the solemn official ceremony that was devoted to the victory in the Great Patriotic War. This year we celebrate the 80th anniversary, the 81st anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. It reminds us to what horrendous consequences racism, xenophobia can lead, and to refuse people's rights to be unique. A more just multipolar world should be based on the norms of the UN Charter in all its entirety and cohesion. One should act upon the basis of equal and indivisible security and take into account the cultural diversity of peoples and ensure their rights to follow the traditions of their ancestors who had said that we should protect and cherish our world in peace. We would remember forever the feat of the soldiers and the laborers in the rear, everyone who forged the great victory. I remind you that on June 22nd, the all-Russian moment of silence will take place that will commemorate the feat. We should pass down this knowledge to the next generation. This war claimed 27 million people. We express sorrow, we remember, we would not forget, and we will not allow others to forget these events. Международная жизнь. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. You have just talked about the renaissance of Nazism and militarism, and we understand what the situation is like right now. I'd like to ask a question. How could you comment on the recent statement of the commander of the German Air Forces on their readiness to go to wage war on Russia? He said, "We're ready to do that tonight. Please be patient." We have commented on that. This is a statement that has characteristics of neo-Nazism if one is brief and plain. But let us talk in details. Holger Neumann, Lieutenant General, is known in the Bundeswehr as a fan of Star Wars. Even Luke Skywalker's helmet, if you trust local journalists, occupies a place of honor in his office. Well, everyone has its own idols. Maybe he only had F's in history, didn't have enough time to play when he was a kid. I think medical personnel should deal with this certain case, but I don't think there is anything that you can explain such statements with. The German leadership, like 85 years ago, deal with some ideas of attacks overnight. They're talking about the protection of the Allies' territory, that they can attack St. Petersburg, the Kola Peninsula, Black Sea beaches, and other territories. But there's one problem. Somehow they have to reach Russia. And what is he planning to fly on? On this phantom German-French defense project for a future air combat system. In this case, he'll need a helmet from Star Wars. Or maybe he wants to dispose of the German Tornado and Eurofighter aircraft at our expense, maybe he should peruse an historic manuscript where he would find information on how we helped, in particular, Göring's Falcons. They've been sleeping in the cold ground ever since. Maybe this German general hasn't heard about it. Our fighters back then prescribed sleeping pills for all of them. They're still sleeping in the damp earth. We should, or we can, come up with different statements forever, maybe mirror their rhetoric, but everyone should be responsible for one's words and deeds and be responsible for future generations, and for past generations that already were victims of such atrocities. Germany, back in the 1930s, remember what they were saying about what they would do in the Volga region and on the Black Sea beaches. In the Black Sea, a lot of vessels floundered, and in the Volga region, they also left their tracks, left their mark. You know what kind of mark? There's another thing that surprises one. No one from the political leadership of Germany called the general to order. There is an expression in Russia, every family has its ugly face. Well, you can say it's his personal opinion, and maybe it was not within his purview to state such things. So the German leadership is playing a dangerous, suicidal policy, flagrantly violating the basic law that states that Germany exists, and that's the Treaty 2+4, Article 2, which stipulates that from now on, from the German soil, only peace would spread, and the actions that could violate the peace between the peoples, and especially the preparations for war, are anti-constitutional and punishable. That's what Germany supported. In the 1940s, Germany used the same slogans to defend Europe. They wanted to impose this slogan on everyone. They were saying they were protecting Europe from Russia. They created a coalition of the willing to conduct a crusade against our country. They received what they deserved. They were suffering. They were saying they were wrong. And further generations also suffered. Why? Because they killed so many people, burned them in concentration camps, destroyed multiple cities, destroyed so many lives. That's why now grandchildren of Nazis that forgot all of those events started dreaming of revenge. Well, history doesn't teach them anything. Let's now look at the situation from a different angle. Germany is a member state of NATO, and the statement given by a German statesman is a statement made by a military commander, by a leader that is not only active in military area but also in political area. NATO continues to position itself as a defender, proponent of peace and justice, and continues to talk about the defensive nature of NATO. But in reality, this German general, no one called him to order in Brussels. Well, this German general talks about NATO, and NATO is used by the collective West to assert its dominance in the world. It's a paradox that German military commanders say that they want to inflict maximum damage upon Russia on the battlefield. They bend their heads to the victims of the Holocaust. Why is their approach different when it comes to our country that lived through so many difficult times and lost so many lives? They continue to divide people on the basis of their nationality. Once they killed people of one nationality and they were sorry. Now they're killing, or they want to kill different people, so they shouldn't be sorry, or what? And it atrocious situation, because it's happening on the eve of June 22nd, a day on which these German generals should feel sorry for previous generations. But that's not happening. The 85th anniversary of this betrayal, of this attack of Germany against the Soviet Union, hasn't changed their minds, but it will be forever in the memory of our people. If you talk about consciousness, justice, moral good, they should remember about their responsibility, their historical guilt. They need to observe a moment of silence at least once a year, during which they would keep silence and remember what their ancestors did. I remember Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, on the eve of the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War. I remember her words. She said, and quote her, "For us Germans, this day, June 22nd, is a reason to feel shame for the atrocities that at the will of Germans were perceived by the people on the territories that were attacked." Everyone knows, Merkel was saying in 2022, how atrocious, how horrible the consequences were of the war. Millions of people from Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic countries, other Soviet republics were killed, tortured. But to make peace, many reached their hand towards us. But I would say they're now spitting at it. But at that time, she wasn't using that rhetoric. She continued following the sufferings that Germany imposed on that. This step borders with a miracle, and I'd like to ask this general a question. Has he read anything of that? In 2021, Merkel was saying that one should always remember what had happened. One should not allow that these events be forgotten, because it's our responsibility before millions of victims and their descendants. It's not millions, it's hundreds, it's dozens of millions and hundreds of millions of their descendants. And concluding her statement, she said, "This responsibility makes us," and I think she meant Germans, "to work towards a peace in the world that would be based on international order." End of quote. Has something happened over these 4 years since that speech? What about the historical memory of Germany? Did it experience the COVID pandemic that made them lose their memory, or cancellation of culture? a part of the war. We see irresponsible statements, atrocious statements of Gerd Neumann, commander of Luftwaffe, is a testament to real intention of NATO. And we see the real intention of the German leadership now. Wherever you see, whatever you read, I think they should reconsider their behavior, their rhetoric. But if you said something like this, someone should have called him to order to say that it was wrong. But this general said what they're all thinking now. And this piece of news looks preposterous following the revelation of the commander-in-chief of Alex Grinkevich, that in German capital publicly said that Russia does not want an open conflict with NATO. I'd like to underscore that if there's any aggression from any NATO member states on any Russian region, no one should have any doubts that the initiators of this crazy escapades will face destructive consequences and measures. Those brigade generals, commanders, would find no protection in any means. They should realize what they're pushing Europe to by issuing such statements and by acting in this manner. Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. Another question. We're now already tired of asking the same question. Do we want to ask about sanctions? You're talking about these packages of sanctions. Well, you're right, but I apologize in advance. Still, I'd like to hear your comments on yet another package, not really a package, but another round of sanctions that were imposed on a number of individuals and legal entities in Russia on June 15th. I'd like to say that this is like a conveyor belt of sanctions. These are illegitimate, unlawful sanctions that were imposed on June 15th. This is like a conveyor belt that never stops. Those were the restrictions against separate Russian individuals and legal entities and a number of foreign companies and enterprises. They do not notice how ineffective these sanctions are, and they reveal the true intentions of Europe. Why? They don't understand that these sanctions are detrimental for Europe and for the world as a whole, because they're talking that they're caring about the food and energy security, but in reality we see that sanctions are obstructing all these noble goals because they're not effective against Russia or any other state for this matter, and they continue to expand, deepen their sanctions. They come up with new restrictions and measures, but they don't know how to make them more effective and make them work against those people against which they were designed to work, so that they don't come back, don't boomerang.
But it's impossible to do actually, taking into account our response measures and many other factors. So with every sanction decision, the absurdity of this policy, it intensifies, revealing its ugly, shadowy side in its entirety. We have mentioned that regularly an effective and tough response will follow. Thank you very much. Is RIA Novosti with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. RIA Novosti, Christina Rodriguez. If you allow us, we have one question today. According to reports from Moldova, a criminal case has been opened against our compatriots Alexei Petrovich from Russia. What is the essence of the charges against him, and how would you comment on those charges? It's no secret, has long not been a secret that the Moldovan authorities, they use this repressive apparatus not only against their own public figures but also against civil activists who oppose official Chisinau's European integration policy. Actually, it's the policy of Romanization, the renunciation of national identity, the writing of history, the cleansing of the information space, the exclusion of anything related to Russia. We have repeatedly drawn attention to politically motivated cases, discrimination against Russian passport holders entering Moldova, including those permanently residing in Transnistria. Such latest manifestation of the Chisinau regime has been the persecution of Alexei Petrovich, permanently residing in the Republic of Moldova. He was charged with, what do you think, war propaganda. The charges of him allegedly distributing fictitious information about the war, and his mobile phone was confiscated. He was banned from leaving Moldova, and his punishment includes a prison sentence of up to 6 years. Actually, he was under secret surveillance, and the cynical aspect of the situation in particular is that a person who is engaged in anti-war propaganda for many years, actually accused of war propaganda, his work is dedicated to perpetuating of the memory of Red Army soldiers. He is one of the founders and leaders of the Moldovan Search movement, which celebrated recently its 15th anniversary. So with his colleagues, for 15 years, he has been restoring the historical memory about those who have stopped the war by winning over Hitlerism and fascism and Nazism, and he is accused of war propaganda. So it's a reburial of more than 700 of soldiers and officers. Those reburials have been detected by him and his colleagues. It's a feat, actually. It's a feat, actually, a sincere person could engage into. So 700 people have been found, not only found but identified. It's such an immense work. It's just a selfless person, and after their identification, they were reburied. So it's just a feat of a civil person. But now they see that it's actually those who protect the truth, they are fought against, and fought against by illegal measures. Alexei Petrovich heads the Pobeda National Committee, the Russian Historical Patriotic Club of Moldova, and is official representative of Russian Military Historical Society in Moldova. He provides support to veterans and conducts important educational programs. It's obviously yet another unlawful attempt by the Moldovan authorities to pressure, intimidate, denigrate, and neutralize a respected public figure. We call on the Moldovan authorities to cease unlawful criminal prosecution and focus on combating real crimes like glorification of Nazi executioners convicted at Nuremberg Tribunal as well as the smuggling of weapons and drugs and the telephone fraud that has reached such threatening pandemic proportions in Moldova. And this person should be left alone. He should be awarded by the Moldovan authorities in order at least to publicly demonstrate their commitment to some human norms. But no, just the remaining paint is going out of them. So we move on. Is Yuzny channel with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova. We have a question. On Monday, at a meeting with Belarusian President Lukashenko, the heads of the Union States foreign ministers Lavrov and Ryzhenkov mentioned the record $55 billion trade turnover. Does it include high-tech sectors? Perhaps that will take place at the Forum of Regions. So taking into account that you are connected with Belarus and you broadcast in Belarus, I would like to once again draw your attention to the comment that has been done and to express our condolences to the people of Belarus. This beastly terror attack committed against children going from Gomel for recreation, and to wish the soonest recovery to those wounded. And it's such a horrible story. And I would like to say that there are no someone else's children, neither in Russia nor in Belarus. And ordinary citizens and doctors and, of course, journalists have responded to this story. So our condolences and words of support to those who are in need of that now. So, in response to your question, an important area of activity for foreign ministries is assisting domestic companies in developing trade and economic cooperation with partners. It's about our countries as a whole and our foreign ministries. The trade turnover with Belarus is an important figure for the dynamics of the development of integration ties with our closest ally that has been mentioned during the talks on the 14th, 15th of June by the Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov during his working visit. And I would like to once again thank our Belarusian friends for their warm welcome extended to our Russian delegation, as well as for the frank and substantive negotiations. One of the key areas of our cooperation with Minsk, with which we are building a unified industrial policy, is 26 integrated import substitution projects in such areas as microelectronics, aircraft and automotive manufacturing, special engineering, metallurgy, and machine tool manufacturing. Deep cooperation has been established at the level of individual enterprises at both countries. In Minsk, the Forum of Regions is to be held on the 24th, 26th of June. The organizers plan to discuss, among other issues, mechanisms for supporting the economic development of regions and individual territories of our countries, ways to strengthen our interregional cooperation. Around 700 delegates will arrive from Russia alone. It will be representatives of more than 70 constituent entities of Russia, business circles, cultural, scientific, educational, and public associations. Traditionally, such events serve as a platform for reaching practical agreements, concluding bilateral, interregional, and intermunicipal agreements, commercial contracts worth billions of dollars. I am confident that this year the forum will make a significant contribution to the development of economic cooperation, and I recommend everyone to follow this event closely. Thank you. Thank you. Is Izvestia with us? Yes. Hello, Madam Zakharova. We have one question today, if you allow me. Yes, of course. How would you comment on the adoption of the decision by Warsaw not to deprive Zelensky of the White Eagle Order, the supreme award of Poland, and regarding his attributing the honorary, so to say, title of Ukrainian insurgent army heroes, those thugs guilty of the mass extermination of Poles during the Second World War. So I have made comments recently about their doubts. I would recommend them to leave this order for Zelensky, because for them not to say that that hadn't happened. Yes, that was the case, and let them live with this shame. In February 1938, do you remember who arrived in Poland for another visit? It was Hermann Göring. He was number 2 Nazist after Hitler. And the then Polish President Ignacy Mostyczki presented Göring with what? Just guess? Yes, the Order of the White Eagle. That was it. So in Warsaw they were getting along well with Berlin, and that cancerous network of concentration camps, it was growing in Germany, those ghettos, and the first of which was the infamous Dachau. Then it was moved to the territory of Poland, and you know what followed. Times changed, but those reflexes that have not received the needed treatment, they have not changed. The habits of the Polish political elites have not changed. So those lessons of history, they have not been studied. So now we see a mutated type of Nazism, the Kiev regime, the neo-Nazism that has merged with terrorism. Speaking about some alleged European values, democracy, in principle, it's the same thing. Regardless of whether it is colorful or not, it's the same system of coordinates, the beastly one, the horrible one, leading to horrible consequences. This caricature nature, but ill-wishing nature. And the most surprising thing, just have a look. Back then, at the end of the 1930s, maybe Poland had no sufficient information. But to understand, to explain, but somehow leave some small percentage that some other school of thought prevailed, and they presented that White Eagle to Göring, it was a mistake and so on, but it cannot be said now. They have had such an experience. They have committed a similar thing by awarding their order to a Nazi. But they just hear now those statements by Zelensky about the historical memory. They demand from him not to make those statements, but he continues to make them. He does not change the policy of his country, but they just praise him, keep praising him, and to stick those orders to him. They keep doing that because there is a thing that is more important for them. It's Russophobia. So if he, just for one step, went away from this those Russophobic intentions, he would be deprived by this order immediately in Warsaw. But he continues to make Russophobic statements and to strike Russian civilian sites committing terrorist attacks of a Russophobic nature. And this order, as from the point of view of the official Warsaw, it can be kept just to conceal their ambitions, their historical memory, somehow to hide the memory of tens of thousands of Polish women, elderly people killed and children killed. But what was the end of that for them? We regularly tell about that, so those manipulations, they will not be forgiven. Because history's lessons are painful, especially for those who have not learned its lessons for the first time. So, is RT Balkans with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We have one question to you today. Because recently, Sergey Narishkin, director of intelligence service, expressed dissatisfaction with Serbia's first military exercises with NATO. Why do you think Serbia took this step now, and how does this affect Belgrade's declared military neutrality? Thank you very much. You know, I would like to say it would be strange that he would express satisfaction, or that he would be glad about that. Because NATO seeks to subjugate all Balkan countries. Not in order to bring progress to them, but in order to deprive them of their independence. And Serbia, not only due to its geographical location, but because of its independence and sovereignty that is implemented in the policy of friendly ties with Russia, extensive interaction with partners in several regions outside the Western camp, and Belgrade's flexible, independent foreign policy aimed at upholding its core national interests. Serbia's leadership has repeatedly emphasized its commitment to military neutrality. Does it have the right for that? Yes, I think yes, as any sovereign state. But for some reason, NATO does not support that point of view. Belgrade is carefully weighing the potential consequences of being drawn into the alliance's aggressive policies, we hope. The attitude of Serbs themselves towards the idea of rapprochement with NATO. As your audience knows, over 80% of the country's citizens view this organization as hostile. They remember NATO's aggression against Yugoslavia in 1999, which resulted in the seizure, actually, of the cradle of Serbian statehood, the autonomous province of Kosovo and Metohija. Women and children were killed, and Serbian citizens, not only the citizens of Serbia, they were diseased because of the depleted uranium used by NATO countries, by the British, and we hope that the mutually beneficial Russia-Serbian cooperation will develop, and the centuries-old historical legacy of friendship between the peoples and the two countries. And we hope that the sovereignty is supported based on national interests. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Sputnik Uzbekistan with us?
Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We greet you from Tashkent, Sputnik Uzbekistan, international news agency. We have one question to you, Director of a third department of CIS countries, said that the Central Asian found itself in the center of rare earth material hype. How does Russia see its cooperation with Central Asian countries with Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan when it comes to extraction and processing of rare earth metals and resources? Thank you. We have said it on repeated occasions, but I'll repeat it. Russia considers the Central Asia to be a strategically important region that possesses huge potential in rare earth materials and other minerals. But there is one small detail. Russia considers these countries to be sovereign and independent, and it respects these countries in this capacity. We see growing global competition for access to global resources on the part of the US and the EU. The Russian Federation is interested in developing the mutually beneficial cooperation, depoliticized cooperation with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan in geological survey, processing and extraction of rare earth metals, and in creating a highly productive added value chains. Our country possesses necessary competences, expertise, skills, technologies to implement these projects. It is very important, and I'd like to underscore it once again, that our approach is based on the respect for sovereignty of our partners, on the lack of political conditions, and on our intention to equally distribute benefits with a focus on localization of processing, research activities, training personnel, and strengthening the independence of the region so that the Central Asia can play a greater role in supplying resources, taking into account the doctrine of neocolonialism unleashed by the West. Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. Thank you very much. Do we have Xinhua International News Agency with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I have a question. Recently, Japan has been continuing to strengthen its military presence near Okinawa. It plans to transform their air force into aerial and space forces of self-defense. It also is actively revisiting and developing relevant program documents to strengthen the so-called defense forces. It causes concern in the international community because Japan is expanding militarily, and we see massive protests of Japanese citizens. How do you evaluate these strategic intentions that are behind these recent steps of Japan? How would you evaluate the actions of the Japanese government that, on the one hand, positions itself as a peaceful power, and on the other hand, always makes this process of militarization more rapid and suppresses anti-war sentiments? When we answer your questions, we always comment on it. This policies aimed at militarization in Japan run counter to the Pacific statements of post-war constitution of Japan. Of course, it causes concerns by Russia and by other countries. We regularly focus or draw the attention of the Japanese side to the actions that does not contribute to the harmonized development of this region. It only escalates the situation. Of course, it undermines the efforts aimed at peaceful coexistence. Japan makes damages our cultural, humanitarian ties, and you know it pretty well as a representative of the country that is neighbor of Japan. And your country is also part of the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you very much. Do we have the Reuters news agency with us? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We have two questions to you today. The first one is linked with the summit of G7 that just concluded in the town of Evian. How could you comment on the statements of the participants of this summit with regard to Russia, in particular with regard to the Ukrainian conflict? I'm forced to follow these developments. Why? Because they discuss the Russian issues there, and a lot of questions arise, but the content and the statements in Evian that focused on geopolitical issues was obvious to everyone. We heard nothing extraordinary. Everything was anti-Russian. We saw nothing but that. We've heard what we used to hear all that time, the same content that is well known to us, the support for the Kiev regime, the intention to increase the supplies of anti-aircraft system, interceptor missiles, long-range missile systems, and of course stepping up military-industrial complex together with Ukraine, and so on and so forth. It was rather unexpected when we heard the words peace, settlement. Of course, they rather they could have sounded, and there would have been a surprise, but we didn't hear these words. But we heard these words on the eve of that summit. One could imagine that they would incorporate these words into the program of the summit, but believe you me, there were no such words. And of course, that is cause for surprise. How can the same people with the same thinking combine such concepts as peace and negotiations and other concepts that they talked about? We have an expression in Russia when you start to decide who's going to take what chair, what place at the negotiation table, who's going to be representing the countries at these negotiations. They nominate themselves to be the candidates, and they say that it's important for further regulation, and they accept statements which do not contain any mention of settling the conflict, negotiating the peace. And this is surprising. G7 has done it for years now, and it's continuing to do it. Has taken up on the responsibility to strengthen the pressure on Russia. We see no results from this economic pressure, no benefit for their economy. Gas and oil sector was also discussed. We saw another level of cynicism, of political opportunism in the deal that is aimed, among other things, at opening the Strait of Hormuz for maritime navigation. They said that allegedly it creates a very good opportunity to introduce new anti-Russian restrictions. This reminds me of a joke. I don't remember if I told you this joke before publicly, but I think it fits the situation. A man calls the police, summons a police officer, and says that the police officer should take measures with regard to a person, a neighbor that always provokes other people with her shameful actions. When the police officers approaches the window, says, "I don't see any woman," but the man says, "Please look closer." The police officer says, there was no woman." "Well, look correct," says the man, "but if you climb up the wardrobe, you'll see that woman." I think that's the same situation. They always try to look for such interesting angles from which they can look at the world using the Russophobic rhetoric. This is just ridiculous, and one wonders what kind of mental state they're in, because we're talking about the memorandum of understanding that would put an end to the conflict in the Middle East and would start the negotiation that would strike a comprehensive deal between Iran and the US. What role does Russia play here? But you remember the joke I just told you. If you climb up the wardrobe, if the European leaders do that and climb it up, they will see another panorama, another perspective of the situation. I'll just remind you that our relevant statement that was published today on the Foreign Minister's website contains the same reminder. We support de-escalation of the situation in the region, and we drew attention of everyone to this issue in that statement. If you go back to the activity of the G7, they just reaffirmed their role as a staff that aims to contain our country, to inflict the strategic defeat of our country. It is not only us that they're targeting, other centers of power that they perceive as a threat to the Western hegemony. And you'll see it clearly in the paragraphs that are devoted to the situation in the Persian Gulf and in the Middle East, where the aforementioned agreements were reached between the US and Iran. Of course, these are pre-agreements, but they are interpreted in a very specific way there. Same goes for traditional paragraphs in this with regard to the situation in Asia-Pacific region. They traditionally criticize countries that traditionally consider them to be their enemies. This image tells us yet another time that they pretend to be leading countries in the Western bloc, serve as a common voice, and represent their interests. But one should also say that the West is just a part of the new multipolar world orders that is now being shaped, not the whole part, just one small part. Why should they decide the destiny of the world? Neither politically nor strategically can they be the leaders of this process. And you should treat these statements of G7 leaders as an opinion of a certain group of countries. They should not set the tone for the discussion, set standards, set norms that would define the future of the world. Another thing that I'd like to mention is the following: the participation of U.S. President Donald Trump in the Evian summit on June 14th. In this telephone conversation, the Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated the U.S. President on his 80th birthday and said that the situation on the battlefield is critical for Ukraine, and no attempts of the Kiev regime to strike the civilian infrastructure of our country would not change that. However, you saw that Zelensky and Western European leaders, the G7 countries, our president said, would try to do everything in their power to say that the reverse is true, and they would impose the idea on Donald Trump to drag out the conflict and to continue the hostilities. That's what was commented on in detail by aide to the president, Yuri Ushakov. We saw the Kiev regime trying to interfere in the process to photobomb. He should be put in prison, but he's trying to become the central point of attention. Judging by the information we receive and judging by the statement of the G7 statement, one of the goals was to use the presence of Zelensky to put a consolidated pressure on the U.S. president and to present the case in such a way that Mr. President Donald Trump would stand in solidarity with them as far as their anti-Russian, Russophobic positions go, and would stand in solidarity with their positions with regard to the Ukrainian crisis, and putting an end to it through, as they were saying for many years, inflicting a strategic defeat upon our country. You see how crazy they are about their statements in Paris, Kiev, Brussels. They're talking about peace negotiations, negotiating table. these approaches look like an ultimatum addressed to Moscow, and we have said repeatedly, and we are saying it now. However, we are not rushing to make any conclusions about the transformation of American approaches and their content, their substance. I suppose that we will need new additional data, information, and clarifications in this regard from the American side. I've had a feeling when I saw Zelensky jumping through the halls of Evian, I thought he would kneel down at some point. I was expecting that, but I think we'll see that in the future. Do you have any questions? Yes, I have another question that is about the military exercise in Armenia that is called Eagle Partner. Apart from Armenian servicemen, it features servicemen of the US, France, and Greece, member states of NATO. How would you evaluate more active actions in the South Caucasus, the participation of Armenia, taking into account that Armenia froze its participation in CSTO? At this background, and I would quote Nikol Pashinyan, CSTO exited Armenia, but they started to freeze their participation. I don't understand this logic. It's complicated. At this point, they froze their participation in CSTO. These maneuvers only cause one to be sorry. The implementation of this military exercise are getting systematic. They take place annually starting from 2023. Whatever peaceful purposes they have, these exercises, the main goal of NATO officers is obvious, and they do not try to hide it. It is the following: to increase the distance between Russia and Armenia. It's an open secret that our country is being viewed as a possible enemy, and we see it in the doctrinal documents of NATO. And Armenian servicemen will be taught how to fight against Russia. One could have not even imagined it at some point in the past. Why? Because our country is home to so many Armenians. Many of those Armenians do not even plan to make a choice regarding their homeland, to divide it to halve it, because both Russia and Armenia is a common cultural space for them. Some time ago, you could not even imagine it, but now it goes in line with the statements of the Armenian leadership. Armenia, they say, is not an ally of Moscow. When it comes to Ukraine, the signals are being viewed by the West. They make conclusions, try to drag Armenia into their confrontation against Moscow. These exercises allow the Westerners to impose their own standards of military construction upon Armenia and to acquire new tools of influence upon Armenia and their policies. Of course, one would be naive to think that the West will provide Armenia with its security umbrella. It's just an illusion. The first people that Westerners betray are their allies, that they call their allies. Maybe one of course could undermine cooperation with Moscow in this regard. One should also take into account the reaction of other countries of the region, their neighbors, judging by the composition of this meeting. They want to please their Western partners. Yerevan didn't want to pay any attention to that because it doesn't give any benefit to the stabilization of the situation in the South Caucasus. It will only create new geopolitical divisive lines and threats. Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. Thank you very much. Do we have media corporation? China We're here. Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. Yesterday, China published a white book. It calls forming a more just and reasonable concept of global governance, concepts and initiatives of China. We see multilateral challenges and challenges to multilateral system of the UN. How would Russia evaluate approaches of China? And what ideas and practical steps in your mind go in line with the approaches of Russia?
So, as this conceptual paper was published only yesterday, it will take time, of course, to study it by our experts, and I think that many elements of the white paper coincide with Russia's views on how to coordinate and regulate the interests and actions of international actors in the 21st centuries, because we discuss that on international platforms, in international formats. So in these issues, Moscow and Beijing are fundamentally like-minded. Of course, some details can be present because it's characteristic for such sovereign countries that are independent civilizations, and Russia and China's shared consensual approach has been outlined by our leaders in the joint declaration on the establishment of a multipolar world and a new type of international relations adopted on the 20th of May 2026 during Russian President's visit to China, and it has been qualified as a flagship document. It is literally a new word in the parameters of the 21st century world order. That could play an important doctrinal practical role in the transformation of international institutions and the progressive development of international law. We hope that this declaration will be supported by the entire international community as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Vestnik Kavkaza with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello. We have one question. Now, as the US and Iran have reached an interim agreement to end the conflict, what are Russia's tasks in ensuring security and stability in the Caspian region? Our country welcomes the active steps taken by Iran and the US to normalize the situation in the Middle East. I would once again mention the statement published today by our ministry. This conflict, this situation has had a negative impact on international security, and the Caspian region was especially vulnerable to that. So we hope that as the agreements are reached, the Caspian states, namely Iran, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Russia and Azerbaijan, will be able to resume the previously planned joint steps within a five-party format, and including, of course, measures to ensure comprehensive security in the region. It's primarily the unacceptability of external interference in the affairs of the five. And the Caspian Sea, safe and unimpeded navigation. It also concerns the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. Unfortunately, navigation remains under threat due to provocations by the Kiev regime. Attacks against commercial vessels and industrial infrastructure of coastal states demand the strongest condemnation and a firm response. We expect that the Ukrainian leaders will learn lessons from the Middle East conflict and finally stop targeting civilian objects in their criminal attacks. Thank you. Is Lenta Dot, are you with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We have one question. Recently, the European diplomacy head, Kaja Kallas, stated that allegedly China is training Russian troops for combat operations in Ukraine. She did not name anyone specifically and did not provide any details. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Li Jian called her statement slanderous. How does Moscow view such statements by the European officials and their impact on China-Russia relations? So to be brief and comprehensive, quite comprehensive, those statements by Kaja Kallas, we consider them episodic and slanderous. So as Kaja Kallas, she has spoiled this post, and her and Borrell, the High Representative of the European Union, is turned into a lower representative also by such statements. We also oppose the policy of the Western countries that is not formulated by some comprehensive, complicated formulas, but those countries, independent countries, they do not need anyone's advice. They develop their relations based on mutual benefit. It's just an attempt to drive a wedge with respect to the friendship of our peoples. If they cannot value the relations of a partnership and let them not interfere into the relations of other countries that can do that, that can cooperate, as they are sick with nationalism. And in order to somehow rectify this context spoiled by Kallas, I would like to note that China and Russia are major sovereign powers, and without regard to the opinions of the Western Bloc, and regardless of all those statements by Kaja Kallas, they build their relations in the political, trade, economic, scientific, technical, and humanitarian spheres. Russian-Chinese military cooperation is many decades tradition, born long ago and sealed during the Second World War. Our peoples remember that. And our leaders have done the corresponding statements during the events honoring the end of the Second World War, the 85th anniversary, and the events in Beijing. Now it is regular joint military drills, joint military exercises. It's regardless of the international situation at the moment, and are not against any third countries. So I would remind you that Kallas and that gang, contrary to them, the Russian side highly values the Chinese balanced and consistent position on the Ukrainian crisis, based on the deep understanding of the Ukrainian crisis and the need to address the root causes of the conflict. And the experience of our country during the response to the Western aggression, I think everyone in the world knows about that. Because we just do not count just the Kiev regime, but the whole collective West is behind the Kiev regime. So as they consider Ukraine as their stronghold, they test on people the military equipment that has not received the license and Just imagine what experience our army and our country has gained. That's it. If that's it, let's move on. Is Bold News with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. The unified electronic visa to Russia have been arranged by more than 800,000 foreigners, and regarding the Estonian and Latvian citizens. So does the Russian Foreign Ministry view the possibility of the EU banning the entrance to Russia to its citizens? So that's the experience of Poland that should be considered, that have just invested a lot into the Western countries, and they have sponsored Russophobia. So that's the reason for the failure. And they have led Latvia and Estonia to become classic police states where Russophobia prevails, and it's the harassment of their own compatriots, just perverted forms, prosecutions on fabricated charges on a nationalist basis. So it's not surprising that the Russian-speaking residents choose to emigrate to Russia. And historically, they have viewed those Baltic states as our states. We have worked a lot there and tried not to notice what is happening there for the benefit of the country we have considered their motherland. And now they realize that they can no longer ignore that. They just felt it in their own lives. And they understand that they are trying to be separated by their own relatives, no possibility to enter, no possibility for the visit of their relatives. And our country is ready to assist those who are subjected to repression in the Baltics and those who simply wish better future for their children. And there is a legal basis for that. Thank you. Thank you. Is El Mayadin with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Al Mayadin is here. We have a question about the US President Donald Trump praising the contributions of President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping in facilitating the resolution of the conflict in Iran. What is exactly Moscow's role in this process? So we contribute to rapprochement in positions, and it's our commitment to resolve the Iranian crisis. Our proposals remain on the table and in our opinion may still be relevant. It is not yet time to go into detail because the negotiation process is not finished, and we have made the statement I have already mentioned. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is news.ru with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We have one more question about Kaja Kallas. The leadership of the European institutions has spoken about the collapse of the European economy. Now it's about the 21st package of sanctions. Kaja Kallas made a statement that the EU has not managed to quickly destroy the Russian economy. How would you comment on that? You know, we have partly spoken about the sanctions they take, but that's absurd. As they have said, the Russian economy is destroyed. So what's the reason for those sanctions, for adopting them? So you have no one to counter, no competitors. They have reached what they have aimed, and those packages, they are invented, they are developed, and as the Russian saying has it, begin from the beginning. So, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov has repeatedly stated what's the reason of their sanctions if they have not brought the desirable result. It's not clear. The EU sanctions policy with regard to our country has not achieved its goals. It's obvious for everyone. Just to distract our country from its way, Brussels has not considered in that. However, the European Union, with its obsession worthy of a better cause, it just continues to adopt those sanctions packages in order to harm our economy that allegedly does not no longer exists according to their statements. So they affect the third countries and companies from other countries. Attempts to achieve the observance by any means, it's just absurdity. It's just a dog unleashed that does not understand what it is doing, no longer understands, and just harms itself because it is just insane and does not think what it is doing. So, in order to ensure allegedly the competitiveness of the European bloc, and their companies are no longer able to keep afloat and have to give away their assets for militarization purposes. So this interaction and this rejection of interaction with Russia, it's not without consequences for the EU. The EU industry, chemicals, steel and automobile sectors, European companies are already losing ground to competitors from China and the United States, and they will continue to do so. Just imagine it's possible to continue for them. And they used to be cutting edge. They used to be something that aspired by other companies in the world. Now the GDP it is consistently below the global average, and according to the forecast, it is 1.5%. The state, the public debt is growing. The figure in 2026 will be a record high for the EU, 84.2%. But that's of little concern for the EU political establishment. They do not see real numbers. They are just understand that they are controlled by the big brother, and they are ready to sacrifice the interests of the economy and citizens of the EU. So this sanctions policy is only the tip of this iceberg. It's the policy of incompetent leaders. Its consequences are much deeper and more widespread. So such figures like Kaja Kallas, they refuse to acknowledge that, continue to make absurd statements, to threaten other countries, to offend them. So it's the best candidate for those purposes. The worst candidate has turned out to be the best candidate because with such a job. A clever person would not have done that job. A worthy person would not have done that. Kaya Kallas exists for that. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Town News with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Town News Information Agency, Nicholas Giovanaggi. Attacks continue in Georgia against the forces advocating the strengthening of Russian-Georgian relations. We become accustomed that Western sponsors are behind this kind of harassment, but in some cases, the connivance of such actions by the Georgian authorities is just astonishing. Specifically, a group of extremists attempted on the 6th of June 2026 to disrupt the Russian language celebrations in central Tbilisi, shouting anti-Russian slogans and offenses. How would you comment on this event? Thank you.
Секунду.
Just a second. You know, it was a group of extremists. I'm not going to dwell on that in detail, on their nefarious actions, to not advertise them even further or anti-advertise them, I would say. I just said a couple of facts. Russian Language Day is important both for Russia and for the world. It is celebrated in Georgia and other countries. In Georgia, it's a long-time tradition. The local intellectuals, public figures, and employees of the sections of interests of Russia under the Embassy of Switzerland gathered towards the around the bust of Alexander Pushkin on the Square of Freedom in downtown Tbilisi, laid down flowers to this monument, and they cited poems of Alexander Pushkin in Russian and other languages. It is telling that a similar event took place with school children and teachers of Georgian schools in Batumi. No incidents were seen there. Alexander Pushkin, devoted beautiful poems to this country, to the Georgian people, culture, to the symbol of friendship and mutual understanding between the two peoples, and we hope that Georgian law enforcement bodies will give us a relevant assessment to the actions of these radicals, hooligans, extremists. It's the decision of the Georgian law enforcement agencies to give these actions the relevant assessment. Thank you very much. Thank you. You know what? How many Georgian intellectuals, cultural figures devoted their lives to the study of the Russian literature or to citing Russian poems, became experts in the poetry of Alexander Pushkin. You know their names, and it is with love and with great gratitude we remind of the fact that there are so many people that consider themselves to be Georgians, treat the poetry of Alexander Pushkin. These people became remarkable experts and researchers of his art. What you described as is running counter to their own ideals. Were they made to do so? Well, maybe they had different goals, but we see what we see. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have news front with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have two questions today. The Kiev regime tried to violently unleash a crisis following the attack at the Sevastopol Panorama Museum. We saw the fire on the roof on the roof of the Kiev Pechursk monastery. Elina Valtonen, Foreign Minister of Finland, said that Russian tourists cannot visit European beaches. I quote her, Russian tourists cannot be allowed to enjoy freedom and entertainment of the European life. She said that Finland and Sweden already sent a proposal to the consideration of the European Commission. In your mind, is such a statement a part of the information campaign to strengthen the Russophobic attitudes in Europe and the image of Ukraine being a victim, and how does Russia assess this statement of Finland? I'd like to complement my answer to the previous question. I'll be honest with you, many things, or the significant part of our Russian poetry that was written in the Russian language, I heard in the performance or in the description, audio description courses or fragments, radio programs by Irakli Andronik. I think that you know the biography of this person better than I do, and I'm referring now to our guests from Tao News. This is the person who was proud of his roots, and it is true that when I was a student, when I was a kid, I was fascinated by these audio programs, by audio fragments dedicated to the Russian poetry. Of course, he was a large expert on Lermontov. Why I'm saying this? Because one should know that representatives of Georgia, ethnic Georgian, are connected, to the Georgian culture, contributed heavily to the Russian poetry. Well, it's just impossible to not know that. Law enforcement agencies of Georgia should find these radicals, these hoodlums. They should punish them. Maybe. I'm just spitballing here. Maybe they should give them a book describing who Irakli Andronikov was. Maybe you should use this. They should use this perspective to rescue the people who received money, or maybe who are fanatics enough to gloat over Russian-speaking poets. Maybe this will help them to realize how stupid their actions were. And it is not us, it is not Pushkin who is suffering from it. They are. This is just surprising, but this is I'm just spitballing, as I said. Now over to your question. Another round of blacklists against Russia says that anything goes, from violation of fundamental rights and freedoms. I'm talking about freedom of speech, of faith, to flagrant Russophobia and the cancellation of the Russian language and culture. We're not seeing paranoid statements. They want to ban the entry of Russian citizens that served in the armed forces of the Russian Federation following the start of the special military operation. They don't know what to come up with. This is the issue. They don't know what to invent next. At the same time, the anti-Russian sanctions of the European Union are getting more international. Why? It's not because other countries join these sanctions. The European Union uses these sanctions to inflict damage upon other countries. This now they touched upon China, Turkey, the UAE, Azerbaijan, Liberia, and of course Russia does not accept these illegitimate sanctions in circumvention of the sanctions of the UN Security Council, and the international community supports us in condemning these unilateral restrictive measures. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Any other questions? Do we have TV Plus with us today? If TV Plus is not present today, do we have After E news agency? Ruslan Pankratov, good afternoon. Madam Zakharova, we only have one question today. How could you comment the statement of the U.S. that their goal is, and I quote them, the subjugation of key areas of the global economy? What countermeasures can Russia take, or what measures can review taken within BRICS and other associations that it's part of? One should remember that the expansion of the BRICS membership happened back in 2024. We established a category of partner states, and it strengthened the comprehensive weight of our countries in the global economy. And of course, it caused different assessments for some people. It was a very good piece of news. It was a factor of development and real freedom for other people, a factor of sovereignty, and an indicator that the sustainable development is going on. Some other people were sad about it. Now, this association accounts for the largest part of population economy. BRICS has established itself as a platform where different civilizational models are presented, has the possibility to coordinate line their approaches in different areas without looking at different centers of power that are only guided by colonialism and imperialism and can't offer not anything else. And they work on the basis of international law and mutual respect. Most importantly, BRICS does not challenge anyone. The cooperation of this format is self-sufficient and strategic. This association promotes a positive, non-confrontational agenda in international affairs. It aims at creating favorable environment for developing human potential, and of course it plays an important role in supporting and addressing issues of developing countries, increasing their presence in the global governance system. It is an alternative that everyone has been waiting for, so that it can replace the bipolar world order, the unipolar world order that only can offer hegemony. This is the alternative. We are different, of course. Our histories are different. We have different capabilities, but we see that we can find common ground and establish relations based on mutual respect that would be of mutual benefit to all. This is the long-awaited global alternative that now, to my mind, is turning into a mainstream movement. Now, those who are threatening everyone all the time, saying that they're exceptional, propagating, spreading aggression, imperial claims, hegemony, those who propagate these values would become alternative movements. Well, this the global avenue for global development is BRICS, and we hope that the association will develop thanks to the implementation of the projects, for example, expansion and application of national currencies, creation of payment infrastructure that would be resilient to global risks, many other things. The agenda is very intensive. Thank you very much. Thank you. Why am I talking about an intensive agenda? So many topics, possibilities, and prospects that were open to BRICS. In Khanty-Mansiysk, we see participation of SCO and BRICS. The IT forum, no one says You have never been part of it. Why are you here now? We were first in the line. We only see a respectful dialogue that takes into account everyone's interests. Tomorrow the forum will end, and it is organized with the help of different agencies, ministries, Commission, Russian UNESCO Commission. Dozens of countries take part in this forum. This is one of the examples that we can give. I'd like to ask whether Ruski Vektor news agency is present here today. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova, Ruski Veter, Tatiana Plotnikova. Often you talk about Westerners. Can you please elaborate? Who do you mean by Westerners? Does it apply to the U.S. as well? And what do you think? Is the U.S. complicit in the crimes in the city of Starobelsk? The United States are homogeneous, you would say? No. And it's obvious to everyone. This country is organized in a very specific way. Each new administration starts implementing something that runs totally counter to the actions of the previous administration. One should not forget that. One should also talk in the context of your question. When you say the United States, who do you mean by that? These are totally different approaches. Any sector you take, any domain, you'll see how different the approaches are, the actions are of a given administration. This is the country that has legitimized the lobbying practices, not only domestically. American companies in public societies can influence the establishment of the policies through funneling money and directly paying to the people. They are also engaged in foreign lobbyism when they pay to certain countries to pursue their interests. This is a very specific establishment. If you want to ask a question what the West is, I think that you would find it interesting to talk about what the United States are, how this country is organized, and who is establishing the agenda, the domestic and the foreign agenda there. Under what circumstances and conditions, and could one consider this country to be a homogeneous body with, of course, different functions, but how can we talk about a traditional definition of a state? This is just a historical question, I would say. Now, as for the West and Westerners, one, of course, can find many answers in different sources, from culture to politics, but you asked me how I use this word, Westerners, or the Foreign Ministry uses this word, the West or Westerners. We use it in different contexts, of course, but first and foremost, we're talking about the countries that have unfriendly regimes. The list is published on the website of our ministry. This is the collective West. We'll provide you with the link. Before the term unfriendly states was coined and approved by the relevant government decrees, we used to use the term the West in the context of NATO-centric policies that were conducted. When we say the West, we mean NATO-oriented or NATO-supported policies. The next thing that also deserves attention is the collective West and the collective Western minority that puts says that it's the opposite of the global majority. a classic example would be the words of Josep Borrell, who said that the collective West is a flourishing garden, whereas other countries are just wild jungles that should help or benefit or contribute to the well-being of this flourishing garden. This is the modern interpretation of the historical processes known as capitalism, trade, slaving, hegemony, expansion, capitalism. At the core of these processes were values of the West, of the Western world, that wanted to subjugate the whole world. These are just a couple of examples of what we mean by the West, the collective West, and the collective Western minority. In different cases, there are, of course, different modalities, but that's the matter in the nutshell. What about the U.S.? The U.S. Is on the list of unfriendly states with an unfriendly regime, and in certain situations we talk about the collective Western minority, and by that we mean Western Europe and the decisions that they take. For example, when they sponsor the Kiev regime, in some contexts the United States, whatever it is, NATO policies, or trying to draw a dividing line between the golden billion and the rest of the world. As for the responsibility for the terrorist acts in Starobelsk and other attacks, well, everyone who is sponsoring the Kiev regime is responsible, whatever they call themselves, whatever formats they use for their cooperation. Everyone who sponsors them, who supplies weapons to the regime and supports them with information or policies, everyone who tries to turn a blind eye on these crimes, all of these stakeholders bear responsibility for what's happening. And it's obvious. If you don't have any questions, any other questions, I'd like to say thank you. Madam Zakharova, there's something else. Is that all, or is there anything else you want to say? Thank you very much.
So, just in case, I would clarify, is TV Plus channel with us? If no, and there are no more questions left, if we have missed someone out, we're always ready to answer questions. Yes, you have missed out the voice of the fatherland, Голос Отечества. Hello once again, Madam Zakharova. We have one question. Голос Отечества on the 15th of June, the 268th anniversary of the birth of Alexander Gorchakov, a distinguished diplomat, was marked. He served as Minister of Foreign Affairs from 1856 to 1882. In the current foreign policy environment, his principle of concentration and strategic patience is often recalled. Russia is not angry. Russia is concentrated. Could you please comment on this principle, Madam Zakharova? How is it applied by our diplomat at present, and how is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs guided by that principle? So I would remind you, let us start with the historical context. This statement, it was done in the specific historical circumstances. What were they? Actually, Russia was defeated in the Crimean War, and those were humiliating conditions of the Paris Peace Agreement. It was banning the Russian fleet. It was the loss of influence in the Balkans. So they just thought that Russia should not be considered with. It was 1856, and Gorchakov, the new Minister of Foreign Affairs, sends a message to all the Russian embassies. I would remind you that back then those documents political and foreign political documents were issued in French in our country. And that formula, it was stated in the French language, but I will cite it in the Russian translated. They say that Russia is angry. Russia is not angry, it is concentrating. For a detailed analysis of this genius and I think revolutionary formula, I would advise you not to listen to my brief response, but to address the researchers who have dedicated to the research of those statements. And one of the prominent St. Petersburg historians, Viktor Lopatnikov, who is employed at the St. Petersburg University. His biography of Alexander Gorchakov was published in the Distinguished People Lives series. And this concept, this phrase, this instruction in its time, he has devoted a considerable part of his work to this saying. So Mr. Lopatnikov analyzes the media field of that time, and he writes that the appearance of that phrase provoked immense reaction in foreign policy circles. It was a response to the challenge that was voiced on many occasions in foreign policy circles, as it was about Russia being angry after the Paris Agreement, avoiding participating in the European affairs, and those circumstances being of a common concern. But that was actually a program document informing the international community of what will determine the political life, foreign policy of Russia. It was a strong position, and that allowed us to reach the success globally. So that statement, it was based on the rules of international law and security of European states. That's what is expressed in this text. It was about obligatory conclusions being made from the events in Europe, and it should be universal and regardless of circumstances. Requirements also necessary for Europe. This statement underlines the main areas of the foreign policy of the Russian Federation, its approaches. So that's the basis for your further investigation. Because yes, this phrase, it was very energetic, very bright, that has gone through centuries. So it's better to be interpreted as these states being aiming towards different purposes and their further implementation and reaching new goals. So he also said that in many cases Russia is silent. They say that Russia is angry, but Russia is not angry. It is concentrating. And as Viktor Lopatnikov writes, it is evident of the drama structure and ironical intonations. They inspired the Russian reader, and they were impressive also for Europeans, to whom they were addressed. So we will provide links to the text and the book itself, So maybe we will provide more details or make a special post on this, because the issue is really interesting. Thank you very much and have a good day. Thank you. If that's it, goodbye to you until next time. All the best to you and prosperity, of course. Thank you.